Howdy, Immortalium here, and welcome to a little bit of an unusual manga review. Basically, I finished reading a couple of manga series recently. When I say recently, I'm talking more about, a little over a month ago. I had intended to review them, but due to, a couple of jobs I had to do, like for example college, for example Christmas, etc, etc, I wasn't able to get around to them. And that's kind of put me off from completing other series. Because, I have these looming over my head and I'm thinking to myself, I need to review them first and then move on to more series. And the longer and longer it goes on, the longer and longer this is looming down on me. So what I've decided to do is just review all of them in this video. What that means though is that I'm not going to be quite as, comprehensive as I would be for them individually. But it's either this or don't review at all because, it's just been looming over me for too long. It's been a while since I've read them. So yeah, basically I'm going to review each one and just devote a little bit of time, etc, etc. Okay, so let's get started. So first up is Satoshi Kon's Opus. Now, it's got a really interesting premise. So basically, when you start the manga, it opens up in, I believe it's chapter 23 of a manga called Resonance, published in Young Guard. A bit of a parody of certain manga magazines. Anyway, and it's basically about Satoko facing off against a guy called the Mask, and her friend Lin comes in and blocks the Mask's attack, sacrificing himself. Now, it starts out in colour, and as it progresses it turns black and white, and then it starts to become storyboards, which is already kind of a little odd. And then finally we figure out that this is actually a conversation between a mangaka and his editor. Chikara Nagai is finishing up the series Resonance, and he's discussing how to end the series with his editor. And the editor's like, I like Lin, so it'll be a shame to see him go, but if you think that's the way to end it that way. And so Chikara Nagai starts writing it, now that he's gotten the approval from the editor. He draws the page where Lin sacrifices himself. And Lin from the book, the manga series, actually takes the picture and pulls it into the world. That creates a kind of a vent that actually sucks up Nagai himself into the world, and so he ends up inside the actual manga that he's drawn, Resonance. And that's how the story opens up. As you can imagine, it's a very unusual premise, but one that actually does sound very Satoshi Kon. It's a very entertaining series. Through it, we see kind of how the manga characters actually view Chikara Nagai. Essentially, Nagai to them is God, because he decides, what happens to them, whether one lives, one dies, how the world changes, etc, etc. And they're constantly saying stuff like, what gives you the right to be God and to play around our lives. So from that perspective, it's fascinating. There's also a lot of humor, as you can imagine. The fact that Nagai is in this world that he himself created, but at first he doesn't believe it, then he thinks it's a dream, and it takes him a while to figure out it's reality. And then he starts to figure out, oh wait, I can actually play around with this world a little. So there's a lot of humor involved in that. In terms of characters, there's some very interesting characters. Nagai himself, of course, very interesting character in how he interacts with the world he has created. Satoko, the lead of his manga Resonance, is also another interesting character in that she basically becomes a buddy for him, helping him to navigate this world and trying to figure out, where Lin is with the picture of him sacrificing himself. Now, in regards to the other characters, I feel that many of the other characters are a little bland, in that they're there more to serve the story, but I think that kind of works in a sense because they are essentially there to serve the story. They're there to serve the story within the story. Now, the ending is very interesting. This was actually unfinished originally. Satoshi Kon left it when he had started on his anime career, and it was left on hiatus. And when he died, they searched his office. They actually found a storyboard of an ending he had planned for the series, and that ending is okay. So it's in storyboard form, so it's not finished, but it's very good looking storyboard, I've got to say. However, it's a weird kind of chapter, I guess I should say, or ending, in that it's very dissatisfying if you've gone into the series for the characters, but if you're into the theme of the series, and the kind of meta craziness of it, then you should be somewhat satisfied with the ending. It isn't the best ending in the world, and there have been a lot of people who said, oh, I was disappointed with the ending. But I personally think that that ending is better than, just leaving it off at the chapter previous. It's definitely a very interesting ending. Now, whether or not it works for the manga, that's up to debate. But, I think it works in regards to themes, not necessarily so in character. So overall, in regards to Satoshi Kon's Opus, I will say this is my favorite Satoshi Kon manga. I liked Tropic of the Sea, but I wasn't in love with it. I thought Dream Fossil was really interesting, but more so for the development of Satoshi Kon as a mangaka, more so than the story themselves. But for Opus, I think this is very much in line with what Satoshi Kon would do with his movies. It's a great read. I gotta say, the art as well is fantastic. There's a bit of awesome color pages at the beginning. Absolutely love the way Satoshi Kon has drawn those colors. And the rest of the manga is very reminiscent of his movies. Very detailed, very kind of his own developed style, which came from Katsuhiro Otomo. I think it's a very good read overall, and I would definitely recommend it. Following that, Osamu Tezuka's Ludwig B, which is his interpretation of the life of Ludwig Beethoven. Now, the manga actually opens up not with the birth of Ludwig, but with the birth of a boy called Franz. Franz's mother is, in childbirth at the beginning of the story. His father is off hunting, and there's a peacock called Ludwig, which sends her into labor when he howls beside her ear, gives her a fright. The father comes rushing back and shoots Ludwig, because of the fact that he irritated the wife. But in doing so, the sound of the gun going off sends the wife into even more shock, and she passes away. Now, the boy Franz grows up, but he makes noises similar to the sound of the peacock, which the father hates, and so he gives out to him a lot. And eventually, Franz gets disowned by his father for a certain event. At that point, swearing, take down all the Ludwigs of the world, essentially like eternal hatred of Ludwigs. Now, around that time, Ludwig Beethoven is born to his family, and that's how the story begins. Now, for me, I thought the most problematic aspect of the story was the opening. I guess the opening aspects of the character Franz, because to me, I cannot understand how he has developed a vendetta against the name Ludwig. Like, let's just go through everything that happened to him. So, his father is the one who gives out to him. So, logically, you think, okay, so he has a vendetta against his father. No. But his father has a vendetta against him because of the fact that there was a peacock. Okay, maybe a vendetta against peacocks. No. The name of the peacock is the vendetta that he goes against, which I just find, that seems a bit odd to me. Now, I actually asked someone, a medical person that I know, and they actually said that could potentially happen. That, it's not a case of logic, it's a case of, who you want to target your hatred at. So it kind of makes sense from that perspective, but even so, I still have some problem dealing with that. But overall, besides that, I think Ludwig B is a fantastic manga. I think the character of Ludwig Beethoven himself is a fantastically character. As he starts out in this poor family situation and he eventually learns music, he's seen as a prodigy. He wants to develop his skill and become famous and have to deal with the nobility. Now, at the same time, there's a revolution going on in France, and Ludwig actually becomes an admirer of the French Revolution, which isn't exactly helpful to him due to the fact that the country he lives in, I believe it's Austria, has a lot of nobility, and so the nobility, as you can imagine, would not be too keen of the French Revolution. Besides that, Franz himself, even though he starts out very problematic, I think he becomes a very good character as the manga goes on, acting as a great kind of counterpart to Ludwig. So overall, I do think he works, but it does take a little while. At the beginning of this manga, I was kind of thinking to myself, why is he vengeance against Ludwig? It doesn't make sense. Now, the thing to point out about this is that Tezuka died while writing this manga, so it is unfinished. And I don't mean that, you know, rushed ending or anything. I mean literally the second volume ends on a cliffhanger that is never resolved. And if you did not know anything about Ludwig B, you could actually finish this expecting, okay, where's volume 3? There is no volume 3. Tezuka died before he could even start on volume 3. From that perspective, you know, that is, of course, annoying. But, you know, I can't hold that against Tezuka, you know? That wouldn't make any sense. And I think that it's still a fantastic series overall, even though it does have some problems. I will say that of all the Tezuka manga that digital manga publishing have printed so far, and that I've read, I would have to say that Ludwig B is the one that I recommend the most. I think it's a great manga. For the final lot, this is a series called Paradise Kiss, done by Ai Yazawa, the author of Nana. Now, Paradise Kiss is a josei series, and what it is about is basically the lead character, Yukari Hayasaka. She is a high school senior. She's getting ready to, you know, take exams and get ready for college, etc., etc. And she is asked to model for this group called Paradise Kiss, who is a fashion group. They want her to be the model so that, you know, that they can actually get to sell their wares to stores. You know, an attractive model can help significantly with selling their goods. Now, while that's happening, she meets the lead designer of the group, George, and there's a bit of a kind of romantic spark that happens between them. And she eventually decides, okay, I'll stick with this group and become a model. And that's how the story opens up. Now, the thing I will point out is that in regards to the story and the characters, there is a big issue I have with this manga, and that is I really found the relationship between Yukari and George very uncomfortable, simply because it's quite destructive. George wants her to be independent, and yet, you know, conform to his ideas of a woman, which is of course contradictory, but, you know, there are men like that. And at the same time, she's trying to appease that. She's trying to be both independent and try to, you know, be his ideal of a woman, which is, you know, pretty much impossible. So, very problematic there. They're always, you know, arguing and getting into arguments, and there's a great deal of distrust between them. There is, you know, of course, a very strong romantic bond connecting them, but even so, it is a very uncomfortable relationship to read, and I will say that I just didn't like their relationship to each other. As characters, they're fine. What I thought really made this manga, though, was many of the other characters, their relationships, their ideals, what they want to do. I thought, you know, as a kind of a work dealing with, you know, what you want to do with your life, I found it very interesting. Now, in regards to that, the story itself, the ending is fine. You know, I liked the ending. I thought it worked well into the story, and it kind of served what I wanted from the story. So I thought the ending worked. Now, besides that, the artwork is, if you've read Nana, it's very similar character designs, particularly to that. Basically, the backgrounds are a little less detailed. Whether or not that's because this is a josei in comparison to Nana being a shoujo, or because of the fact that this was done before Nana and therefore she wouldn't have had as much experience, I'm not sure. But the characters' designs themselves are as fantastic as ever. Really appealing looking series, I would say. Just that I do find that relationship really problematic between the two lead characters. But I think the characters themselves work, and I think the characters around them are great. So overall, I'd recommend this series, but not as highly as I would the first two, and certainly not as highly as I would Nana. But I do think if you're a fan of Nana, it's worth checking this out. Particularly since one of the bonuses of Nana actually does make some references to George, the character in this, so it's very interesting to find out who George is and then go back to those little bonuses in Nana and, you know, just compare. So, that's my review of those series. Hopefully you found it interesting and informative. I'm sorry that it isn't quite as detailed as I usually do, but it's either do this or not review them at all. So yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.